with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight.
These need to be baptised, these need to be baptised. The vast majority, if not all of these people, had already failed in their initial asylum claims.
I've got an exclusive that blows the lid off Welby's asylum seeker conveyor belt denial, and
Another example of a senior Conservative, a Conservative donor, making comments that are clearly racist and clearly misogynistic.
Is it racist to say Diane Abbott makes you want to hate all black women? Also,
to this, I got ready for the battlefield. I didn't get to finish my bronzer though because I literally started getting shot at like. This is what I was wearing for the day. I can't believe they gave us these cargos for free because they are so cute.
Gen Z aren't keen on subscription or even conscription, but should we make the willfully unemployed get off their backside and fight for Britain? Plus,
there'll be a much-needed modernising of gender recognition processes, which are humiliating and overlong.
Why Starmer's sudden defence of women against the trans lobby proves a Labour government would be completely unworkable. On my panel, it's GB News star Nana Acquia, Tory MP Jonathan Gullis, and author Amy Nicole Turner. Oh, and what are this lot up to here, do we reckon? I will reveal all about these gangs very, very shortly. They're making millions, by the way. Get ready, Britain, here we go. The epic Diane Abbott Tory donor race row next.
It's 9 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler. Your top story this hour. Downing Street has said comments allegedly made by a Tory donor about MP Diane Abbott were racist and wrong. It comes as the police are understood to have been contacted over Frank Hester's alleged remarks. The Conservative Party's biggest donor reportedly said Miss Abbott made him want to hate all black women and she should be shot. Mr Hester has now apologised and says he abhors racism. Miss Abbott, who's now an independent MP, described the comments as frightening and worrying. Meanwhile, Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth says it's staggering that Rishi Sunak has taken so long to recognise Mr Hester's comments as racist.
They're absolutely reprehensible comments. Rishi Sunak should now apologise to Diane Abbott, and the £10 million the Tory party have taken from this individual, Rishi Sunak should order that money to be paid back. If these comments are racist, as they are, if they recognise these comments are wrong, they should pay the money back.
Now, Lee Anderson made his first appearance in the Commons this afternoon since defecting to Reform UK. He took a seat on the opposition benches next to George Galloway. Mr Anderson was stripped of the Conservative whip last month after refusing to apologise for saying that Islamists had got control of the London mayor. In other news, children in England who identify as trans will no longer be prescribed puberty blockers. The government said it welcomed the landmark decision, which they say is in the best interests of children. Puberty blockers, which pause physical changes in young people, will now only be available to children as part of clinical research trials. And police investigating a chain of funeral homes in Hull have now recovered 35 bodies and a quantity of what's suspected to be human ashes. It comes as 2 people arrested in connection with that ongoing investigation have been released on bail. The 46-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman were being held on suspicion of a number of offences, including preventing a lawful and decent burial. Hundreds of families who used legacy independent funeral directors have contacted the police, fearing they may have been given the wrong ashes. And social media influencer Andrew Tate insisted that he's innocent of the charges laid against him as he was released from police custody in Romania this afternoon. A court in Bucharest ruled that he can be extradited back to the UK to face charges once his trial in Romania ends. He was arrested after lawyers representing 4 of his accusers told British police that he was planning to flee Romania, where he and his brother Tristan now live. They're accused of sexual offences and human trafficking, allegations they've both denied. And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Patrick.
Welcome along. Now, a top Tory donor allegedly said in 2019 that Diane Abbott makes you want to hate all black women and that she needed to be shot. Cue, massive backlash, media frenzy. Frank Hester, who was given the Tories 10 million quid in the last year, has said sorry for being rude. A statement from his company read, Frank Hester accepts that he was rude about Diane Abbott in a private meeting several years ago, but his criticism had nothing to do with her gender nor colour of skin. The Tories then sent out a procession of ministers and high-ranking officials to say the donor is not really a racist.
It's clear that what he said was inappropriate. He has, as I understand it, apologised for those remarks. I think the critical point here is I don't think what he was saying was a gender-based or a race-based comment, but it was clearly inappropriate. He has apologised, and I think we need to move on from that.
The Labour Party are in full swing, despite the fact that Diane Abbott had the Labour whip removed for denying racism against Jews, the Irish and travellers. Anyway, Labour are calling for the Tories to hand back the £10 million worth of donations from Frank Hester because they say he's a racist and that money is now tainted. But, as we know, the Tories were taking the view that this wasn't racism. Until, step forward, Kemi Badenoch, Qualities Minister Business Secretary, who said Hester's 2019 comments, as reported, were racist. I welcome his apology. Abbott and I disagree on a lot, but the idea of linking criticism of her to being a black woman is appalling. It's never acceptable to conflate someone's views with the colour of their skin. MPs have a difficult job balancing multiple interests, often under threats of intimidation, as we saw recently in Parliament. Some people make flippant comments without thinking of this context. This is why there needs to be space for forgiveness where there is contrition. And now, because he can't be outmanoeuvred, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has piped up, saying the comments allegedly made by Frank Hester were racist and wrong. But he accepts his apology and wants everyone to move on. But of course, he hasn't actually apologised for being racist, if indeed people think he was. He's apologised for being rude. And tonight, the Met Police have confirmed that they are assessing the alleged incident after the initial report appeared in The Guardian. Miss Abbott has not described Mr Hester's comments as racist or misogynistic, but said in a statement tonight, "It is frightening. I'm a single woman, and that makes me vulnerable anyway, but to hear someone talking like this is worrying. For all of my career as an MP, I have thought it important not to live in a bubble, but to mix and mingle with ordinary people. The fact that 2 MPs have been murdered in recent years makes talk like this all the more alarming." Well, Lee Anderson was booted out of the party recently for his Sadiq Khan comments, wasn't he? He said his language about Sadiq Khan and Islamists was clumsy, but he will not apologise. Well, it begs the question, doesn't it? If Lee Anderson gave 10 million quid to Rishi Sunak, would he still have a job? Rishi Sunak is happy to take the millions from a bloke who he thinks was racist, but would not back an MP who used clumsy language about Sadiq Khan. Interesting. But let's get the thoughts now of my panel. We've got GB News presenter Nana Akua, I've got Conservative Stoke-on-Trent North MP Jonathan Gullis, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. Nana, I'll start with you. You don't think this is racist, do you?
Well, look, he said something that out loud that a lot of people might think in their heads and aren't foolish enough to say out loud. But frankly, in my view, Diane Abbott is an embarrassment. I mean, remember in 2003 when she criticised private schools, then turns out she was sending a kid to one of them, and then she said West Indian mums will go to the wall for their kids. In 2012, she went on about and saying all cabbies were racist, and then a load of cabbies got really upset about that because that's simply a nonsense thing to say. In 2017, there was that car crash interview on LBC where she was the Shadow Home Secretary, and she couldn't work out how much it would cost for 10,000 extra police officers, and she went ranging between 300,000 to 80 million pounds. She is an embarrassment. And then finally she was suspended from the Labour Party for being racist. So because she said that Jewish people don't really experience racism, it's a bit like redheads and it's more prejudice and stuff, and she did a letter in the Observer. So if all black women were like her, I would be embarrassed, frankly. So we're all different. I think where he's gone wrong is conflating behaviour with colour of skin, so people can deem that as racist. But to me personally, I wasn't offended because I just think Diane Abbott is a mess.
But that shouldn't come into it. Why is listing Diane Abbott's shortcomings relevant to this conversation? Let's take all that out of it and look at the comment in isolation. Look at the comment in isolation. It shouldn't be up for debate whether it's racist. It is so obvious. You are the only person in the whole country, I think, today. You must not have ears today to not be able to see this clear racism.
So you think that? I didn't say that. I didn't say that, and you're not listening. I think you just listen and hear what you want to hear. I said that when you conflate the colour of skin with someone's behaviour, then that can be seen as racist. So I totally get that people will see that, but he doesn't see it that way because he's talking about her behaviour.
But the fact that he doesn't see it that way, it makes it even more troubling.
There's a lot of
that he could say, "Oh, I didn't realise it was racism." It was victim blaming for her being both black and white.
One at a time, and then we'll bring Jonathan in eventually.
Take Black Lives Matter. I've got a very, very good friend of mine who said, and she's been the best friend of mine, she's taken care of me whenever I've needed it, she said that you can see why people would start to hate black people because of the behaviour of Black Lives Matter and because of what went on that. And I got what she was saying. She wasn't trying to be racist and said...
OK, but she wasn't trying, but she is being racist.
You don't even know what I'm going to say. She was not saying that she hates all black people. She was saying that that behaviour, if it is representative of many black people, then that could be something that could make people dislike them. And I, as a black woman, know that if I do something, I could be seen as representative of black people. So I'm well aware that I have to look into how I behave.
But that's what's wrong, isn't it? Bringing sex or gender up and making it relevant in terms of in a derogatory way is racist and sexist.
Jonathan, do you think the Tories should hand back the £10 million?
Well, I think the comments were vulgar, and I think in the context in which we've had them brought to our attention, I would deem them to be racist, and I'm deeply uncomfortable with that. In terms of the money, at the end of the day, Mr Hester is a private individual who's entitled to choose what he wants to do with his own personal finances. If we were going to go on the logic that Jonathan Ashworth is pushing for, us returning £10 million, the Labour Party was literally found guilty of institutional anti-Semitism under an investigation from the EHRC. So, based on that logic, should the Labour Party not completely fold and pack up and go home, based on the fact that they've been found guilty, to have not taken the complaints or the allegations very seriously when anti-Semitism was rife within their own party ranks and targeting their own members of Parliament, including my predecessor, Ruth Smith, who was brutally attacked verbally in the inbox, and actually one person has since gone on to get a conviction. So, as I say, Mr Hester, what he does with his own money, that's up to him. Obviously, the decision to accept or not is above my pay grade, to be perfectly frank, Patrick. What I will say is the comments were vulgar. I do deem them to be racist in the context that we've seen them. But I think that...
Should other MPs not have come out and said that then earlier on? I think we saw Mel Stride... We did see Mel Stride earlier. Well, just before I go to...
What I would say is that Mr Hester's clearly a wealthy individual. He could clearly do something decent with his money, extra money. He could go and speak to Diane Abbott and talk about maybe a charitable cause in her local constituency that he could give towards, which would actually transform the lives of maybe her constituents. That would be a positive outcome from what has been a very ugly scene.
Look, the bit about saying she should be shot and all that, that's just just ridiculous. You wouldn't say that, and I really can't take him seriously for saying that. Well, I think he was just playing.
And in the climate we're currently in, it's very dangerous.
But that was 5 years ago, so I'm not saying it's acceptable in any level, and I'm not saying that his comments weren't off. And these are the sort of things that people say and don't consider that they might be deemed as racist. Because I've had plenty of people say ridiculous comments to me that are, in a sense, racist, but I know that they don't mean it that way. And so, as Kemi Badenoch said, there should be an energy for forgiveness to explain to him why some people would take what he said as racist. But I think the comments themselves...
But then that would stand.
Could I also...
5 years ago, so why are they
But he
talking
hasn't apologised.
OK, fine, but can I also just point out, Amy, as we heard earlier on, I mean, Diane Abbott hasn't actually called him a racist.
Diane Abbott hasn't called him a racist.
No,
but hang on a minute. Everybody else can see the racism for what it is.
But it was directed at her. Does that matter? I don't know.
Maybe she hasn't explicitly said that, but I'm sure she is well aware of racism as she has suffered it throughout her career. She's the most abused female MP going. The point I want to make is he has an OBE, and I think that should be removed. I think the £10 million should be given. I think that the Tories were reluctant to call it racism because of this £10 million, because for the minute they call it for what it is.
It was just a silly comment.
A silly comment. He's also got previous on this.
Comments like this sort of thing.
People have to be able to be forgiven.
There has to be an element of forgiveness. He's apologised, and he just needs to acknowledge that some people might see it as racist.
But on the one
I was
hand,
not offended by the comments.
But on the one hand, you often say we live in a post-racial society. Racism isn't really that big a deal anymore. In modern Britain,
I've never said any
you have said comments along those lines.
You're just making that up.
You have said comments along those lines. You've downplayed You've suggested that racism isn't much of a problem in the UK.
I didn't say that at all.
You have said that.
I have not said that.
OK, whatever.
Shall I tell you what I've said?
Yeah.
What I've said is that people... This is not a racist country, but there are individuals who are racist within it.
Well, hang on a minute. That's OK.
That's my point.
So, go on. Do you think Britain is a racist country?
Well, clearly. Look at the examples. The examples that we've had in the last 2 weeks alone. What we've had from Lee Anderson.
You're telling me...
Let Amy talk.
But Nana, you are sitting next to me saying, oh, well, people say this stuff all the time. People say this stuff all the time.
Doesn't make them a racist.
We have problems with this. He needs to get to a point where he understands and has the contrition to... But he is...
Do you know what the problem with this is?
We do have a
Go on, Jonathan.
To infer that there's institutional racism in this country and that Britain is a racist country is so demeaning to people. It, by the way, pushes people to the fringes of extremism. In Stoke-on-Trent, we had 9 BNP councillors elected because at the time when it was just the Labour Party was the single party in power, there was nowhere else to go and protest. And the BNP disgustingly were able to use a platform and able to reach out to disenfranchised, particularly white working class individuals. I don't want that to be the case. I want people to say in the mainstream, and by just saying broad stroke that this is a racist country will just make people feel so isolated, make people so demeaned, and actually upset people who, the overwhelming majority of this country, the 99.9% of this country are not racist people.
Okay, so how come all these...
Nana, can I ask you a question? Does Amy, or people like Amy, who are white, have a right to tell you that this guy's comments were racist against black people and that Britain's a racist country?
We see, this is the thing. This is what often happens. I'm told what I should be, what I should find.
I'm not saying it.
I'm being told what is racist, yet if that's directed to me, I don't find that comment racist. But I understand why people will see it as racist, and I also understand what he was trying to get at. All we need to be able to do is speak to people, talk to him, explain why some people might see that as a racist comment, because that's when you get the undertones of racism, where people won't say things because they're scared of being racist, and then they will behave racist. So I'd rather he spoke and said those things so you can explain to him why some people might see what...
By the way, Patrick, very quickly, this deserved public humiliation will be, believe me, I'm sure for Mr Hester, a massive learning curve.
Yeah.
And I suspect he will never be daft enough or stupid enough to say anything like that again. And certainly for others out there who may think stupid things, I hope to God from this they learn to keep that in their head at the very worst case.
It's a clear demonstration of the covert racism that is in this country. And but I just want to come back on you saying people like me, people like me. It's not people like me. The Met Police, a barrister has said that the comments fit the ingredients of stirring up racial hatred. It's not just me.
Well, that might be the case. That's stirring up racial hatred.
Diana's not actually reporting that.
But that was 5 years ago, and I wonder why it's coming out now. I'm not saying the comments are good comments. I'm saying that this is the sort of thing that people think and
by the way, with the Met Police, I wish they were proactive at calling out the racism against Jews on the streets every weekend that we're currently seeing.
Exactly.
They seem to be very quick to react to this, yet Diane Abbott's not made the legal complaint herself, so I can't understand how the Met's taking the case into their own hands, but they're allowing people to go on the streets calling for intifadas and calling for from the river to the sea, which means the decimation of the Jewish state and therefore the genocide of the Israeli people.
Well, yes, it does. It does to them, and that's what's important.
OK, all right, it's a lively start. Thank you very, very much. Now, in a bit of a gear change, it is obviously time for the Great British Giveaway. Spring is in the air, and so is your chance to win a garden gadget package, a shopping spree and an incredible £12,345 in tax-free cash. Here's how you could make those prizes yours.
Well done, Patrick.
We've got cash, treats and a spring shopping spree to be won in the Great British Giveaway. You could win an amazing £12,345 in tax-free cash. Plus, there's a further £500 of shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. We'll also give you a gadget package to use in your garden this spring. That includes a games console, a pizza oven and a portable smart speaker, so you can listen to GB News on the go. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
All right, still to come. As it emerges that dangerous criminals will be released from prison months early in a bid to tackle mass overcrowding, is the government putting the British public at risk? We've got a big exclusive on that. James Coates, the son of Nottingham victim Ian Coates, one of 3 people fatally stabbed by a monster who arguably shouldn't have been on the streets in June last year, joins me live. Don't miss that. But up next, it's the head-to-head. Is Tory MP Richard Drax right that young job seekers who turn down work should be conscripted for 2 years into the army? Falklands veteran Simon Weston battles political commentator Connor Tomlinson in a feisty exchange in just a few minutes' time. This is Patrick Christys Tonight. Don't move.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
For decades, Britain has been dealing with immigration, but for one part of the UK, it is a relatively new experience. GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie has this report.
At the end of April 2023, Ireland's immigration was up by 31%. And over a decade, Northern Ireland's has doubled, with South Belfast being the most diverse. Tracy Kelly is a DUP Belfast City Councillor who deals with the issues in this area on a daily basis.
We have working class communities like Sandy Row, like the Donegal Pass, who are blending in with others who are coming here to work and live and mix. But there is also an issue when there's too many people who can't get housed. That seems to be the main issue that I deal with. When people in their own community who've been born and reared here have to move away because there's a lack of housing.
Takura Makoni represents the African community of Northern Ireland.
I would presume mostly 99% of asylum seekers or migrants and refugees coming to this part of the world would have very little knowledge about the internal dynamics in Northern Ireland. So you find out it's almost like you're thrown in the deep water. To have the cognizance to say, here, I need to pick up that I'm living on a peace line and these guys don't like those guys and maybe these guys can tolerate me and those ones won't. You don't have any idea of that. It'll take you up to 10 years to get a real sense of that because, remember, you're focused on trying to rebuild your life.
To avoid further tensions, should government be looking at the placement of those refugees and migrants?
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
This is Patrick Christys tonight, only on GB News. Now, coming up, I bring you one of several exclusives that we've got for you this evening. A story that lays bare the shocking state of Britain's parole system. But first, it's time for tonight's head-to-head. A senior Tory MP with years of military service has called for young job seekers who turn down work to be conscripted. Richard Drax, a former British Army captain and current member of the Commons Defence Select Committee, told The House magazine, in some cases, particularly among some of the young, they have got to the point where they're not prepared to contribute to our country and to serve their country. And if they've refused 3 offers of a job, or whatever the number would be, you must go and do 2 years in the armed forces. Well, that'd get them working, wouldn't it? This comes as officials warn today that young people are fueling a worklessness crisis in Britain, with nearly 3 million under-25s neither employed nor looking for a job. Almost 4 million adults are also being paid benefits without any requirement for them to search for employment, and that is an absolute disgrace. So tonight I'm asking, should young job seekers who turn down work face conscription? Let me know your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.com. Tweet me at GBNews while you're there. Make sure you vote in our poll. The results to follow shortly. But first, going head-to-head on this, our former Falklands veteran Simon Weston and political commentator Connor Thomas. And both of you, thank you very much. Great to have you both on the show. Connor, I'll start with you. Should the work-shy young be made to go and fight, or at least do some military training?
Well, some time ago, Patrick, I was on your show arguing against conscription for Gen Z to go and fight with boots on the ground in Ukraine. And so I say the following, with the proviso that we shouldn't go and fight unjust wars like invading Iraq to spread pride parades. But I do think for a dispossessed cohort of young men, about 50% of whom now these days aren't growing up with a father in their home, the army might provide them some kind of discipline, structure, mission statement, patriotism, sense of responsibility they can take home with them and start rebuilding our country with a renewed sense of belief in it. Great example of this, Cambridge academic Rob Henderson has just put out an autobiography where he grew up in California, he grew up in the foster care system, never knowing his mum or dad because his mum was a drug addict. His foster family split up, his dad moved away, he grew up on drink and drugs and spent 7 years in the armed forces, the American Air Force, and learned from how to make his bed in a proper way, right the way through the military, all of the skills required to make him a world-class academic. And I think that kind of opportunity paid forward to young boys in England might help the social mobility gap we're seeing with white working-class lads.
All right, Simon, if we've got millions of young people who are too lazy or feckless to go and get a job and contribute to our economy, should we not put them to work in the armed forces?
First of all, how would you get, if you can't get them up to go and sign on the dole, how are you going to get them to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to do all the cleaning jobs and clean their boots and to make their beds? I get kind of fed up of everybody saying, we've got this problem with people, conscription, let's put them in the military. Why are the military becoming the social workers of our society? Politics has failed. The government, or whichever government, because it's continual government, it's not just one, have failed to deal with the unemployment crisis. There's always been a problem with people claiming what they're really not entitled to, but because they're allowed to do it, they will do it. And, you know, it's so much. My facilities management company, we offered a job to a guy, and unless we could employ him in the town that he lived in, even though he only had a 20-minute bus ride, and this is a man who could drive, wouldn't catch the bus to go to work, to do a shift and he would have earned about £700 a week.
But then I'll throw it back to you, Connor. I'll throw it back to you, Connor, on this. That bloke there, who, by the way, is the kind of person that I tend to despise, probably would have gone and done that job if he thought there was a chance that he was going to end up being conscripted into the military, right?
Well, that, and also we know that, I think it's something like 60-odd% of petty theft offenders that have over 11 convictions, and this is from juvenile detention centres right through to adult prisons, go on to re-offend. Now, look, we've got packed prisons at the moment, mainly because we've got about 10% of that being foreign criminals. We've got, I think, the highest number of foreign criminals in Western Europe here, so sure, kick them out, but also to alleviate some of our prison population, and at the moment, rather than the woollier rehabilitation programmes we seem to be putting men on, maybe military service could actually provide a lot of these young lads who have fallen down the wrong path a bit more structure. I do think, of course, the military shouldn't be the dumping ground for people that can't put their lives together, but at the same time, you can provide people with the requisite conditions to cultivate some virtue and responsibility and maybe make them better than their family circumstances have made them.
Simon, you're shaking your head.
Patrick, I've got to say, if these guys have got petty criminal offences, 11 or more, for petty theft, you're then going to put them into a military unit living in barrack blocks where kit is left out routinely because you need easy access to it, or you've just cleaned it. You then have to go for a shower or nip over the naffy to get a drink or something, and you come back and your stuff's not there. Who are you going to look at? You're going to cause more disharmony in the military than is necessary, and we're looking at the military to mop up all of these people. Why are we offering them prisoners? You know, these people have to live close, cheek by jowl. They have to work and trust the people next to them, trust that they're not going to steal their equipment, which, by the way, if you lose it, you have to pay for it. And the military pay is so woefully inadequate. Where's the money coming from to do all of these things about rehabilitation? Are the military expected to rehabilitate all of these criminals, get these people back into a work mode? You can draw out individual things and individuals who have done something exceptional, but they're the exceptional to the rule, not the rule. And that we have to have the rule. And these people deserve a better shake of the whip than they get if they had to deal with all of these people.
Yeah, and Connor, I mean, the overarching issue here is this staggering figure that there are nearly 3 million under-25s who are neither employed or looking for a job. So it's not the fact that they are just unemployed, it's the fact that they don't even want to get a job. I find that absolutely astonishing. What is psychologically wrong with so many under-25s, Connor?
Oh, lots of them are claiming mental health difficulties, and obviously some of that is played up because some of them will be work shy, but a lot of it's because they've been put under really strange conditions. Like, if you've grown up with a smartphone and you've had just a deluge of depressing content filtered through your childhood and you've got no other frame of reference, and then you've just been through the pandemic and you're a little bit emotionally soft, and your household hasn't got that much integrity anyway because your mum and dad have split up, no wonder you're a bit more emotionally fraught. And that's why I'm saying, look, and I defer to Simon on how the military barracks are actually run, because he served, and God bless him for that. But I am saying that some form of national service could be good for some people, because it could take them out of the environment that is currently allowing them to fall into a cycle of unhealthy thinking patterns that's keeping them out of the workforce. They could come back from that and be a lot stronger and more emotionally resilient.
Simon, look, I'm just again defer to you on this, but did you serve with people who, you know, if it might not have been for the military and them getting in at that time, you know, might have gone off the rails or might have had a tough start in life, and then it did sort them out? I mean, there is that possibility, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. I'm not writing or discounting that it would be beneficial for some, but if you're going to release people from prison, which has been suggested, let them out early, and then they'd have to go and do a year or 2 years form of national service. But these people aren't frightened of punishment because they've already been punished. They've already experienced what it means. They're not frightened. So if they go in and do some deed, whatever it may be, whether it be violence, drugs, but don't forget, this is the other thing that people aren't thinking about at all. If you take drugs and get caught taking drugs, that is the end of your military career. Now, if you then go for your medical, having taken drugs, there's no way they can put you in the first place. So suggesting that they're going to be forced into a situation having 3 or 4 job offers and turning them down, you can easily forego all of that by blotting your copybook straight away without any repercussions, because nobody's going to send you to jail for having taken drugs. But, you know, you can get yourself out of being in the military by conscription for that.
OK, both of you, thank you very much. Top stuff, that. Really, really enjoyed it. Great. So, look, who do you agree with? Is Tory MP Richard Drax right that young job seekers, not even seeking jobs, are they, at this point, should be conscripted into the army for 2 years? Steve on X says yes, 100%. It would do them the world of good. They could learn skills. Anyone saying otherwise is condemning them to a life of doing nothing. I would argue they're condemning themselves, but I take your point, Steve. Alan says the military deserves to be seen as a professional body, so the suggestion it's a dumping ground for layabouts is an affront. Vicky says, give them the choice. Serve the local community in some way, or perhaps conscription. One way or the other, they need to earn their benefits, or the dole, as it was called back in the day. Look, your verdict's in. 73% of you agree that young job seekers rejecting work should be conscripted for 2 years. 27% of you say they shouldn't. Right, look, coming up, I've got loads on for you tonight. Sir Keir Starmer has found his big boy boots. He's backed the ban on transgender athletes in women's sports, but I outline how I think, frankly, a Labour government would just be fundamentally unworkable due to all of these screeching U-turns. Former Labour MP Bill Rammell shares his thoughts. But first, is the government putting Brits at risk by releasing criminals early from prison in a bid to tackle overcrowding? Plus, we have an exclusive that lays bare the shocking state of Britain's parole system. I am joined by James Coates, who's the son of Nottingham attack victim Ian Coates. Now, he lost his treasured dad last year to a monster who most certainly shouldn't have been walking the streets. I will also have another exclusive for you very shortly that blows the lid off Justin Welby's asylum seeker conveyor belt. So all action tonight. Stay tuned.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. Whilst in the south-southeast of the UK, it is actually going to turn largely dry as we go into Wednesday. It's a different story towards the north and west. That's because we have a frontal system here that is eventually going to start to edge back southeastwards as we go through the night. That is going to bring some heavy, persistent rain across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later into northern England and Wales as we go through the early hours of tomorrow. Further south and east across the rest of England and Wales, a drier picture, but a cloudy one and a windy story for all, and so temperatures really aren't going to drop much, many places staying in double figures. As we go through tomorrow itself, then this band of rain does gradually push its way a little bit further south and eastwards, but doesn't make much progress, so it is going to linger and bring quite a bit of rain across northern England and some parts of North Wales too. A drier story further south, limited bright or sunny spells here, but temperatures rising to highs of around 15 Celsius. Windy for most of us, but the strongest winds will be across northwest Scotland where there's the risk of gales, but also some sunshine. As we go into Thursday, and again staying mostly dry towards the southeast, but elsewhere there'll be quite a bit of rain around, outbreaks of rain feeding up from the southwest across many places, with a band of more persistent rain across Northern Ireland and Scotland pushing northwards. Showers to come as we go through Friday. Some of them could be heavy, and then Saturday's likely to turn wet again. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Household energy bills will fall by £238 per year. Good news. An average of £20 a month. That's as Ofgem unveils its new energy price cap. So joining us in the studio is GB News economics and business editor Liam Halligan.
The Ofgem energy price cap, that's the regulated amount that energy suppliers are allowed to charge, will fall from £1,928 a year to £1,690. That's from April the 1st. That's a drop of about 12%. That should save the typical household 20 quid a month. Prices are cheaper than they were, but they're still very elevated by historic standards. Certainly if you're an American household, a French household, even a Spanish or an Italian household, you're paying a lot less for your electricity and your energy in general than you are here in the UK. The energy companies have been a bit tricksy with the government because while they are lowering the energy price cap and the headlines are, well, your energy bills are coming down, blah, 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 the energy providers have actually chiselled out from Ofgem the permission to charge households an extra £2.33 a month on average. And the energy companies say that is money which they need, the energy companies, in order to support households who have got big debts on their energy bills. I don't know about you, but whenever I talk to people down the pub about energy bills, many of them say, well, the energy company's got like £2 of my money and it won't give it back to me. What's going on here? So there are lots of concerns about customer balances with energy companies, and it's also worth saying that as part of this announcement, the bit that no one will notice is that the energy companies are being able to charge all households to try and flatter the energy companies' balance sheets, which to me, on first reading, seems a bit odd.
Welcome back. Coming up, can Keir Starmer be trusted not to cave into the woke mob? But first, GB News can exclusively reveal that the vile thug who led a gang of teenagers in the brutal murder of Gary Newlove, husband to the victim's Commissioner Baroness Newlove, could be released from jail in just months. Adam Swellings was the ringleader of a group of boys who repeatedly punched and kicked the father of three to death outside his home back in 2007 in an attack that shocked the nation. Swellings was sentenced to life in prison after being found guilty of the murder, but GB News has learnt tonight that the Parole Board is assessing his case, meaning he could be released in just a matter of months. That comes on the same day as the government announced that some criminals will be released up to 2 months early in a bid to ease the overcrowding crisis in British prisons. But arguably the biggest form of soft justice was the decision to convict Nottingham triple killer Valdo Calacade of manslaughter instead of murder and detain him in a high-security hospital, not a prison. Well, I'm joined now by James Coates, whose father, Ian, was murdered by Calacade. James, thank you very much for joining me. I really do appreciate having you on. Is the government failing victims and victims' families?
Yeah, to put it pretty straight, that's what I feel is happening. With this news today, they're just looking at the wrong end of the scale. It's not about letting them out early because the police state the prisons are overcrowded. Create more prisons. I'm not going to kid ourselves here. Like the country's a shambles. Crime rates are at a massive high. Knife crimes, they're disgustingly high. The deterrent for a crime is next to nothing now. So there needs to be available cells for these criminals to go into, which would put people off committing these crimes. Because a lot of them know that they're just going to be back on the streets. Take like shoplifting, for example. You basically get away with it now.
Yeah, indeed. And the initial case that we got hold of exclusively tonight, really, was that this individual kicked a man to death in 2007 and was sentenced to life. And then here we are now. He could be back out again. He'll still be quite a young man by the time he's released. Let's deal with that first. When you hear about cases like this, presumably you think, what's the deterrent here? This guy could still go on and have a relatively normal life, but obviously the victim is dead and the family of that victim, they have a life sentence, don't they?
Yeah, it's the fear for me that obviously they're going to walk around a corner and see this guy walking around the street. And it's things like that you will have with you forever. Like they've already lost their loved ones to such a gruesome attack. The last thing they want to turn around and is see his killer walking free. And we've seen it over the last few months with Humphrey Burke being released after 2 years of a life order, and the victim's family saw him shopping. And it's our biggest fear as well that someone like Valdo, a person, you picked the correct word just before the break, monster, could be out in a case of a few years.
Let's focus on that case now for the obvious reason. Could you just explain what your emotions were when you realised that this monster was going to be charged with manslaughter instead of murder and then detained in a high-security hospital? And my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, that means that he could conceivably be up for parole sooner and more regularly than somebody serving, you know, a definitive prison life sentence, as it were. What was your emotions about that?
Absolutely dumbfounded to hear the words given to by the defence and the judge after we'd seen months and months of hard evidence. Everybody's seen what he's done. Everybody knows how calculated he was. The fact that this man, or this animal, was carrying a knife, which should already carry a prison sentence anyway. He's carrying bags of knives. He's brutally murdered my father and 2 innocent students, stabbing them almost 50 times, and he'll never spend a day in prison. And it's just things like that that just seem absolutely wild to me.
What do you want to happen?
In an ideal world, he needs to spend the rest of his life behind bars, if it's a hospital or a prison, but he needs to be held accountable. There needs to be punishment, because right now he's a patient, he's not a prisoner. And when he's better and his mental health is to a manageable level, he will be released back into the community. And he's already shown over the years that he doesn't follow the rules. He doesn't believe that he's ill. He doesn't take his medication. He's very violent. And he will do it again. And there's going to be other innocent people that are going to be affected by him and many others like him. And that's our fear, is that something needs to be done to stop that, because I could never live with myself if he was released and somebody else got hurt.
James, how are you and the rest of your family? I know I spoke to Emma Webber, whose son Barnaby was killed as well a few months ago now. How are you guys getting on?
Struggle. It's a massive struggle. Some days a little bit better, some days aren't. We feel like we're reliving it all the time with all these inquiries and inquests, but it's something we have to do. It's something we can't bring our loved ones back, but we can fight to make sure that this don't happen again to somebody else. And it's been proven by all these agencies that there's massive failings in the system. Nottingham Police being a big one, with them putting under special review now. It just shows that the issues that we're bringing forward are there, and there needs to be a massive change, because it can't happen again.
Yeah. Well, James, can I thank you for coming on? I can only imagine how difficult it is to, you know, rake everything back up and come on and talk about this stuff. So, you know, I apologise that you have to do that, but I think, you know, if it can enact some kind of change and make sure that other people don't have to go through what you and the other families have gone through, that maybe some element of good can come out of that absolute disaster that happened there. So, James, thank you very, very much. That's James Coates there, whose father, Ian, was murdered by that monster Kalakane. Now, that was, of course, James. Look, a parole board statement said this. Adam Swellings had a review where the decision was recommendation for open conditions in 2022, and he's now been referred again and is in the initial assessment stage at the moment, so no oral hearing listed. All right, so basically that's on the initial case there, and whether or not he will indeed be released early. Look, coming up, just how widespread is the pray to stay scandal? This is something that we have been following intensely on this show. A Church of England priest has blown the lid off and risked his own safety to tell all about migrants converting to Christianity so that they can win asylum in the UK.
They did mention to me the fact that there might be people, quote, out to get me as a result of giving such evidence.
Absolutely, that is completely bombshelling. You will not want to miss it. But first, Sir Keir Starmer says common sense has to prevail as he backs a ban on transgender women competing in female sports. But can the flip-flopper-in-chief be trusted to keep his word to women? Former Labour MP Bill Rammell gives his take next. This is Patrick Christys tonight. We're only on GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Absenteeism and parents whose children miss a week or more of school face increased fines in a government drive to tackle absence.
This is another one of those government policies which has done nothing to improve the education of our children. In fact, since this was originally introduced some 10 years ago, the educational standards for our children, the 11-year-olds who can't read when they go up to primary school, have got worse and worse and worse. So it's not working. So what do? They just increase the fine, like that may make it work. Most of the parents who get fined are taking their kids out so they can take them on a holiday before the holiday companies push the prices up. And frankly, as a parent, if I've got a £600 discount on my holiday versus a £60 fine, I'm going to go for the £60 fine.
You'll suffer the fine.
Yeah.
let's not forget the other huge absence that children had recently during COVID. Schools were closed for months and months on end. Online learning was really not making up for that. So how can, it's very difficult for the government to say it was fine for us to take your kids out of school for months, but if you take them off for a few days to go to Disneyland, then you are the worst parent ever and you should be...
But also, it's the pandemic that caused some of the problems with absenteeism now.
Absolutely.
Because the mental health issues that some of these children now have.
And there are tens of thousands of children, they call them ghost children, that have simply disappeared from the school register. So it would be nice. It's really, really scary situation. I'm not saying that the government is, taking great measures.
Well, I think one of their plans is to have a national register, which would help with that.
Which would definitely help. But I think it's almost you can't. They can't deal with the real problem, so they're going after actually perfectly decent parents who are just taking the odd day off, to save money, frankly.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. An absolutely bombshell exclusive with a former Church of England vicar who blows the lid off the baptisms for asylum scandal, raising massive questions about Welby. But first, NHS England has today banned puberty blockers for children after an independent review, meaning that kids who are considering transitioning will no longer have access to drugs which halt the physical changes on puberty. Do we think this is entirely a coincidence after Andrew Doyle's fantastic special on this very subject recently? I certainly think not, but there we go. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer has ended months of indecision and thrown his personal support behind banning transgender athletes from female competitions. After recent bans were announced in British swimming, cycling and athletics, the Labour leader told The Telegraph, "I think the important thing is that the sports governing bodies take a lead on this," and they are doing that. And we're supportive of what they're doing, particularly in elite sports. And in the end, common sense has to prevail in terms of safety and integrity of sport. But hang on a minute. This is the same party who just last week were announcing manifesto pledges like these.
Labour will offer the country to pick up legislating to protect the LGBT community with a comprehensive trans-inclusive ban on conversion therapy. We'll also strengthen the law so anti-LGBT plus hate crimes are treated as aggravated offences, and there'll be a much-needed modernising of gender recognition processes, which are humiliating and overlong.
Let's bring in former Labour Minister Bill Rammell. Bill, thank you very much for joining us. Look, Keir Starmer's going to be shouted down by the woke mob behind him if he becomes Prime Minister, isn't he?
I don't think he's going to be shouted down by extreme transgender activists. And I don't think there's an inconsistency between what Angela Eagle was saying and what Keir is saying. On the specific issue, in my view, Keir has rightly made clear that there should be a ban on transgender people participating in women's sport. People who are male, who go through puberty as male, inherently have a physical and a genetic advantage over females, and there should not be, it shouldn't be treated as a level playing field, and that's what Keir was saying. And you know, you might argue Keir has been slow to declare his views on these issues. I think in part that's been because of sensitivity.
He's not been slow to declare his views on it, Bill. He's been very slow to U-turn on it, actually, hasn't he? Because before it was, what was it, 99% of women, and then he didn't want to get drawn on it, and then now all of a sudden he's saying this. I mean, one thing that goes underreported in my view is that if Labour do win by quite a large majority, which is, you know, looking likely, isn't it, at the next election, who are a lot of these MPs going to be? A lot of young people just out of short trousers who might have worked in the charity sector and been involved in student politics. That lot do not want to ban trans people from taking part in women's sports, Bill.
Well, with respect, Patrick, I think that's completely at odds with the people who've been selected as Labour candidates and who are going to be Labour MPs. But the reason Keir, if you like, has taken a step-by-step approach is that he doesn't want to toxify the debate, and there are people within the Tory party, led by Rishi Sunak, that do want to do that. But I think increasingly Keir has rightly recognised that the extremism of some extreme transgender activists is not going to go away. That's why, and this has been happening over a process of 6 to 9 months, Keir has been making it very clear that trans rights cannot override women's rights, that self-identification as transgender is not and should not happen under a Labour government, and parents rightly should be informed if their children are questioning their gender. Now, all of that, I think, is in line with the views of the vast majority of people.
So if you look at Keir Starmer and some of the decisions he will possibly have to make when he is actually in charge, he's going to have this stuff on gender issues, OK, which the Tories are looking to vote on Friday, I believe it is. That's going to be a massive struggle for him. It is going to be a massive struggle for him to get anything like that through. The Gaza situation, or indeed any conflict in the Middle East, is going to be a massive problem for him as well. We're also seeing as well issues like he's brought in Mark Carney, for example, to, as far as I can tell, find ways to tax these squishy middle classes more than normal. That could well backfire at the polls. Is a Keir Starmer Labour government actually practically unworkable?
No, of course it's not. And, with this critique that Keir is weak and will be pushed around, for God's sake, just look at what's happened under his leadership. Compare where the Labour Party was under Jeremy Corbyn and how it has been transformed. And that's taken tough, ruthless leadership. And I think people should judge politicians in opposition by the way they manage their parties. And Keir has brought the Labour Party massively back to the centre grounds so that it's Labour that's representing the mainstream majority. And frankly, the Tory party are frankly a bunch of extremists these days.
A bunch of extremists, Bill? That's a strong statement there, realistically. This is really annoying, Bill, because unfortunately we're at the end of the hour and I've got to let you get going now. But I
could quote a whole range of examples.
We've got to go, Bill. I'm sorry, mate. I'm sorry. We'll have you back on. Bill Rammell there. Apologies, Labour Minister, former Labour Minister. Sorry. Right. OK. That's annoying, isn't it? Anyway, right. Coming up, the outrageous story of a family-run haulage firm that has been fined a staggering £66,000 after 6 migrants snuck into one of their lorries. That is a big exclusive. We've got that. But next, Parliament is finally investigating the Pray to Stay scandal of migrants converting to Christianity in order to win asylum claims. This whistle-blowing Church of England priest reveals all in a damning interview shortly.
These need to be baptised, these need to be baptised. The vast majority, if not all of these people, had already failed in their initial asylum claims.
This is massive, and it's next.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Whilst in the south-southeast of the UK, it is actually going to turn largely dry as we go into Wednesday. It's a different story towards the north and west. That's because we have a frontal system here that is eventually going to start to edge back southeastwards as we go through the night. That is going to bring some heavy, persistent rain across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later into northern England and Wales as we go through the early hours of tomorrow. Further south and east across the rest of England and Wales, a drier picture, but a cloudy one and a windy story for all, and so temperatures really aren't going to drop much, many places staying in double figures. As we go through tomorrow itself, then this band of rain does gradually push its way a little bit further south and eastwards, but doesn't make much progress, so it is going to linger and bring quite a bit of rain across northern England and some parts of North Wales too. A drier story further south, limited bright or sunny spells here, but temperatures rising to highs of around 15 Celsius. Windy for most of us, but the strongest winds will be across northwest Scotland, where there's the risk of gales, but also some sunshine. As we go into Thursday, and again staying mostly dry towards the southeast, but elsewhere there'll be quite a bit of rain around. Outbreaks of rain feeding up from the southwest across many places, with a band of more persistent rain across Northern Ireland and Scotland pushing northwards. Showers to come as we go through Friday. Some of them could be heavy, and then Saturday's likely to turn wet again. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Want to be a winner?
You've won £18,000.
I'm flipping heck. I don't know what to say.
Enter our massive spring giveaway with 3 big seasonal prizes to be won. There's £12,345 in tax-free cash to give your finances a spring boost. We'll also send you on a shopping spree with £500 worth of vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. You'll also get a garden gadget package. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight, shocking testimony from a C of E whistleblower.
These need to be baptised, these need to be baptised. The vast majority, if not all of these people, had already failed in their initial asylum claims.
An exclusive with the man blowing the lid off Welby's asylum seeker conveyor belt.
The church says we're just trying to offer an open arms welcome. I think sometimes it's a little bit more than that. That, you know, sometimes there's a bit of a political agenda as well.
We revealed the scale of the asylum seeker con. Plus,
you don't have to look far to spot the migrants. They're everywhere here. We film as one clambers into the back of this lorry, disappearing out of sight.
another exclusive, the man being fined because illegal immigrants break into his lorries, and... The NHS hits bloating point. I'll tell you how many million people now work for it. Also, should we pay illegal migrants to move to Rwanda? This story has just landed. I will reveal all about the latest harebrained Home Office scheme that will make your blood boil. That story has just landed in the last few minutes. I've got all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages tonight with GB News star Nana Acquia, Tory MP Jonathan Gullis and author Amy Nicole Turner. Oh, and what are this lot up to? I will reveal all about the gangs making millions from luxury cars. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. We are about to blow the lid off the church's asylum seeker scandal. Next.
Good evening, it's 10:01. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story this hour. Downing Street has said comments allegedly made by a Tory donor about MP Diane Abbott were racist and wrong. It comes as the police are understood to have been contacted over Frank Hester's alleged remarks. The Conservative Party's biggest donor reportedly said Miss Abbott made him want to hate all black women and she should be shot. Mr Hester has now apologised and says he abhors racism. Miss Abbott, who's now an independent MP, described the comments as frightening and worrying. Meanwhile, Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth says it's staggering that Rishi Sunak has taken so long to recognise Mr Hester's comments as racist.
They're absolutely reprehensible comments. Rishi Sunak should now apologise to Diane Abbott, and the £10 million the Tory party have taken from this individual, Rishi Sunak should order that money to be paid back. If these comments are racist, as they are, if they recognise these comments are wrong, they should pay the money back.
Lee Anderson made his first appearance in the Commons this afternoon since defecting to Reform UK. He took his seat on the opposition benches next to George Galloway. Mr Anderson was stripped of the Conservative whip last month after refusing to apologise for saying the Islamists had got control of the London mayor. In other news, children in England who identify as trans will no longer be prescribed puberty blockers. The government said it welcomed the landmark decision, which they say is in the best interests of children. Puberty blockers, which pause physical changes in young people, will now only be available to children as part of clinical research trials. Social media influencer Andrew Tate insisted that he's innocent of the charges laid against him as he was released from police custody in Romania this afternoon. A court in Bucharest ruled that he can be extradited back to the UK to face charges once his trial in Romania ends. He was arrested after lawyers representing 4 of his accusers told British police that he was planning to flee Romania, where he and his brother Tristan now live. They're accused of sexual offences and human trafficking, allegations they've both denied. And a former Boeing employee who had raised safety concerns about the company's aircraft production has been found dead. John Barnett, who's seen here in the Netflix documentary Downfall, the case against Boeing, reportedly died from self-inflicted gunshot wound in South Carolina. The 62-year-old whistleblower had been due to testify in a lawsuit against his former employer, claiming that other employees had deliberately fitted substandard parts to planes. US authorities are now investigating, and Boeing say their thoughts are with Mr Barnett's family and friends. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Patrick.
The Church of England has been running an illegal immigrant racket. That's the allegation. This issue first reared its head when a failed asylum seeker blew himself up outside Liverpool Women's Hospital. It turned out he'd been baptised and confirmed by the Church of England, but they lost contact with him. Acid attacker and twice failed asylum seeker Abdulazidi went missing again. Questions were raised about the role churches were playing in giving illegal immigrants a backdoor into Britain. Then this guidance for Anglican clergy emerged, giving them tips on how to help asylum seekers, how to vouch for them and help them stay in Britain. And then the former priest in Darlington, Matthew Firth, went nuclear. He claimed that the Church of England was running a conveyor belt of dodgy asylum claims, baptising men who were not Christian, with Asian men with bags of cash in attendance, and essentially a ready army of crooked lawyers waiting in the wings. We repeatedly went to the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, and the Church of England for comment. They kept denying everything. They kept saying nothing to see here. They kept saying it's up to the Home Office, not them. And the Bishop of Chelmsford, the Right Reverend Gully Francis Decani, refuted the increasingly convincing claims again today.
If he's claiming that the Church of England is being a conveyor belt for baptisms in order for people to gain asylum status, that is not the experience that I have, and I don't believe that there's the evidence to suggest it.
And a spokesperson for the Darlington Diocese even called it nonsense. Well, today, the lid has been well and truly blown off. Reverend Matthew Firth appeared before the Home Affairs Select Committee. The Archbishop was invited, apparently, but declined to attend. He then did an interview with our reporter Charlie Peters exclusively for Patrick Christys Tonight. What he reveals is staggering. It began by him explaining the attempt to silence him.
They did mention to me the fact that there might be people, quote, out to get me as a result of giving such evidence on what is a sensitive topic and a, you know, in some spheres a bit of a kind of contentious topic. And so I just was given that bit of warning, and it's concerning. And it's concerning for democracy, really, when a witness at a select committee has to think about whether there's going to be blowback because of evidence they've given.
But he will not be silenced, and now he explains the sheer scale of the scandal.
To be baptised, these need to be baptised, and so do these. And then you spot the pattern that actually, you know, the vast majority, if not all of these people had already failed in their initial asylum claims, and they were now in the appeals process. So I think everybody that were being brought to me had already failed in their initial asylum claim.
Have other people spoken to you about their own experiences who are too afraid to make public their comments as you have?
Yeah, I think people are afraid to speak out. I think that, you know, at times, and, you know, in relation to certain topics, there can be a little bit of a climate of fear in terms of speaking about these matters. I've had colleagues in various parts of the country saying to me either that it's happened in their patch, or they've seen a similar dynamic in their patch, or they've said things like, oh, well, yes, we all know this sort of thing is going on all over the place. So it's almost like an open secret that people know that this dynamic is happening, where people are seeking baptism for the purposes of asylum claims. Yeah, so they know it's happening, and many clergy have seen it in their own patch, you know, firsthand. In my time, there weren't any charities using the churches in terms of legal support, but I have noticed that since then, I've seen social media posts from 2022 and also from this year, where churches like St Cuthbert's, but also in Hartlepool and Redcar, are being used as legal centres where solicitors who are specifically seeking to help people whose initial asylum claims have been rejected, they're positioning themselves in those churches and almost basing their operations out of those churches. And so presumably the churches are happy to you know, join in with that process. So I think when sometimes the church says we're just trying to offer an open arms welcome, I think sometimes it's a little bit more than that, you know, sometimes there's a bit of a political agenda as well, perhaps.
Since announcing your own experiences very publicly through the Telegraph, you've also looked further into the situation locally in St Cuthbert's in Darlington, and has discovered that that church was actually advertised very openly by activist lawyers in the area who deal with asylum claims.
Yeah, so as I was preparing to give my evidence at the Select Committee, I was obviously doing some more research, and what I found online, and I've got here, is a particular organisation, a legal organisation that says they're supporting people who are seeking sanctuary, specifically people whose applications have been refused. And then I did a little bit more digging and found that that legal team were basing themselves out of St Cuthbert's, Darlington, but also a church in Redcar, a church in Hartlepool, and other locations. And so yes, there seems to be in certain places a bit of a partnership going on in terms of both like an arms open wide sort of welcome to people as individuals, but also working with legal teams who are trying to help people whose applications have been refused.
And it's specifically on people whose applications have failed.
Yeah.
They're seeing the church as an alternative way to recover that first failure and possibly get it passed on a second time.
And I think this is why the church's guidance on this issue needs to be tightened up with eyes wide open, because you know, I don't think churches would want to be sort of used like that. So I do think the guidance needs tightening up, and I think you know, people need to have their eyes open to what's going on in this area.
A longer version of that extraordinary interview is available on the GB News website. So what he says there is that it's an open secret amongst the church that this is happening. Charities specialising in failed asylum seekers are now operating out of churches, OK? And that there is a massive political agenda within the Church of England. Let's get the reaction of my panel now. GB News presenter Nana Acquia, Conservative MP for Stoke-on-Trent North Jonathan Gullis, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner. Nana, charities specialising in failed asylum seekers operating out of churches, accompanied by lawyers.
Well, it's an industry, isn't it? I mean, you literally couldn't make this up. It is an organised, focused industry where there's a lot of money changing hands. It's all under the guise of them being good, but actually there's financial benefits, I think, all round. And it is time that this really was exposed. Justin Welby said that sending people to Rwanda was against the judgment of God. I remember that, and I thought, what a ridiculous thing for him to say. And then the alternative plans for Rwanda, which I know we're going to talk about later, where they're going to be paid to be sent there. I don't understand why the government have not got a handle on this and have not decided they're just simply going to send people back. I think it's absurd.
So one thing that's important, Jonathan, as well, is we went to the Church of England, we went to the Archbishop of Canterbury repeatedly as these different allegations kept coming forward. Deny, deny, deny. They even said that what this individual was saying was nonsense. I mean, everyone can make up for their own minds now whether or not they think that was nonsense. Does Welby have to go?
Well, I think Reverend Firth there was incredibly brave in coming forward and sticking his head above the parapet, knowing that the institution was going to look inwards and fire in his direction. I think it's absolutely grotesque that woke Welby is allowed to oversee the demise of the Church of England, rather than actually preaching about God. He's busy trying to play God, in my opinion, far too often. He's brought shame upon the church. He spent far too much time in the House of Lords trying to be a politician, rather than actually focusing on the day job, which is looking at this. He is, whether he likes it or not, he is the CEO, essentially, of the Church of England. It's his responsibility to know what's going on. It's his responsibility to look into these things. We know he's turned a blind eye in the past when it comes to very serious allegations of child sexual assault, which he himself has admitted that he, when he was, I think, at Liverpool, had not dealt with appropriately, and that actually the victim had been the one who'd forced out the church, not the perpetrator. He's got a dismal and abysmal record of failure, and quite frankly, in my own personal opinion, he should go.
Amy, this is happening, is it not? We have charities specialising in failed asylum seekers, operating out of churches, a ready army of lawyers ready to mop this up. It's an open secret in the church. It's political. It's happening. I mean, are we going to deny this?
Well, the thing is, Reverend Firth, he is an outlier. He is one voice, and predominantly the voices are saying quite the opposite. But if it was...
He's just told you why.
Let me finish.
He said it's because he'll get silence.
Come on. My point is, even if it was happening, ultimately the decision-making comes back to the Home Office. The Home Office employ asylum decision-makers whose job it is to check that things aren't fraudulent. Now, if there was a dodgy baptism, that is fraudulent, and that asylum application shouldn't be accepted.
Who bears responsibility of the dodgy or the fraudulent
The Home
baptism?
Office.
The Church of England doesn't.
The Church of England is not going to turn down baptising people. I don't think it is the Church of England's job to be the judge.
But what if they are creating asylum claims? So this is the thing. People who have got failed asylum records are having an asylum claim created in this country by the Church of England. It is then their responsibility.
But as we've said, most of the parishes and most of the reverends that gave evidence at the Home Affairs Select Committee said that this is not happening and they haven't experienced it. But as I've said before, we need more asylum decision makers, because I think this comes not from not from a scandal of this.
Look,
it comes from.
I'm sorry, no, I will not stand for this.
But you're not letting me.
Absolutely, I'll let you talk long enough about this.
Finishing the point.
There is no more evidence that can possibly be needed than this. You have got people with bags of cash at the back of church, asylum seekers, queuing up, ready to be baptised, and then disappearing afterwards again. One of them blew himself up outside a Liverpool maternity hospital. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Well, it's perpetuating because people like Amy.
Hang on a minute.
They
weren't given.
Let me finish, because you've had.
You can't level that accusation at me and not let me respond.
Well, you can do, but when I finish talking, it's people like you, Amy, that help to perpetuate this situation, because you are. I don't know why you're wanting to believing that there's nothing to see here when it's quite clear there is a problem.
Because it's quite clearly the problem is in the asylum decision-making, which is quite often rushed because there aren't enough asylum decision-makers.
Absolutely
They make
bonkers, Amy. This is bonkers. They're making fake asylum claims.
But yes, and that should be rooted out. However, the whole idea of conversion is very rarely used to grant asylum claims.
Jonathan, your take.
So first of all, it is being used. Whether it's being used
but it's
lots or not,
it doesn't make the claim accepted.
Secondly, we've got a situation here where I absolutely agree, and that's why the Prime Minister has doubled the amount of asylum decision makers
But they
in the
haven't
Home
managed
Office
to.
with
They've
the funding that we've given.
targeted.
The issue that we've got here is that the Church of England, whether it likes or not, is aiding and abetting. Now, I'm not going to cast aspersions. I would hope that it's not done willfully, but aiding and abetting asylum claims where they're claiming that they've converted, and these people are going missing after. We saw that with the recent horrific attack and murders. We saw what happened, obviously, outside the Liverpool hospital as well. It is undermining the fundamentals of the Church of England that mean that, and with the Archbishop Woke Welby, constantly trying to barrage people who want to control their borders, talking those people down, making vague links back to 1930s Germany, which is always an obsession of the left in some cases, is deeply depressing and is going to undermine Christianity even further. Look at the last census data. Look how many fewer people are claiming they're Christian. That's on his watch.
But you undermine Christian persecution worldwide.
We're going to draw a line. Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, Archbishop Welby actually remarkably today has tweeted about people in Nigeria being taken hostage by gangs. Those gangs, by the way, happen to be Islamists, and he's not willing to mention them. So this is the kind of guy we're dealing with here. Reacting to Mr Firth's testimony, a spokesperson for the Diocese of Durham said, "We are extremely proud of St Cuthbert's and the work the Church does to ensure asylum seekers and refugees are welcomed and supported in Darlington. The baptism records before and during Mr Firth's time at St Cuthbert's and the testimony of local church members do not accord with Mr Firth's evidence. As priest in charge, it was his responsibility to check the authenticity of candidates, and it is surprising that, as he acknowledged to the committee, he did not report any sign of anything amiss at the time. Even so, it is not the Church's responsibility to assess the veracity of asylum claims." And, Amy, you can sass all you want, but they're creating the claim. So that's the point here, right?
But the claims are rarely relevant anyway.
It is the point, OK? It is the point.
It's a loophole.
And the religion or faith is not determinative reason for asylum. Coming up, the Tories urge Rishi Sunak to urgently change course after Lee Anderson's seismic defection to Reform UK. How many letters of no confidence have gone in now? That and much more in my press pack. But first, this is another scandal for you, and it's another exclusive. I reveal the family-run haulage firm that's been fined a staggering £66,000 after 6 migrants snuck into one of their lorries. Ed Rogers, director of the firm, has plenty to say about Border Force and our shamefully leaky borders in just a few moments. It's Patrick Christys tonight. We're only on GB News.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Our woke army, a topic we talk about almost every day on this show. And now the decision to allow women to join frontline army fighting has been described as a failed exercise in political correctness, because government figures reveal that only 15 female recruits completed basic training for either infantry or tank units between January and September of 2023. A senior army officer says women are put off joining frontline units amid numerous allegations of rape and sexual discrimination. Well, joining me now is former NATO commander and Royal Navy officer Rear Admiral Chris Parry, CBE. Chris, always a pleasure to see you on the show. So here we are again. We're talking about diversity targets, and it seems that no matter how much they huff and they puff, young women simply aren't joining up.
Well, I mean, the life's not for everybody, Martin. It's not even for most men, to tell you the truth. This is a tough life, and it's a life that is geared towards the sort of physical and mental, I hesitate to say skills, but aptitudes that men have. You know, the idea that men and women are interchangeable in all these roles is ridiculous. What we need to have is all roles open to both men and women, and those that are suitable and have the aptitude for those jobs should be going into them. If we've got 15 women who are going into the infantry and the armoured corps, then that's fine. They're the ones that are suitable. It's as simple as that. Any idea that we should have quotas or any sort of percentage of people from certain ethnic groups or from from women is ridiculous. We want the best people who serve our country and can defend it.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Coming up, is it true that there have been a flurry of no-confidence letters sent in to Graham Brady in relation to Rishi Sunak? But more of that in tomorrow's newspapers very shortly. But first, Britain's migrant shame plunges to new depths as a family-run haulage firm is fined 66 grand after 6 men snuck onto the back of their lorry in France. Ed Rogers, director of EM Rogers Transport, is absolutely fuming with the government and slack border force after being slapped with a huge fine, and doesn't understand why hard-working British businesses are being punished for our shamefully leaky borders. I'm very pleased to say he joins me now. Thank you very, very much. Could we just explain a little bit, maybe, to our viewers and listeners exactly what has happened here, then? So illegal immigrants have been getting into your lorries and you're being fined?
Yeah, evening, Patrick. Yes, that's correct. We're just going about our sort of normal working practices. And in this example, one of our drivers was coming back from Italy, and he came back through the normal routes up through France. He went through the scanners on the French side of the border, and when he came over to the UK side, which is still in France, they found 6 immigrants in his trailer.
OK, but, I mean, these immigrants just can't help but get in, can they? I mean, we sent our reporter Mark White over to Calais, and we played some footage of that a little bit earlier on as well, and showed them just breaking in. I mean, it can't just be down to the lorry drivers to, fight these people off.
Well, that's the thing. At the end of the day, our guys are just normal guys going about their work, and they're not border force agents, they're not security guards, and he and we are being punished on this occasion for not fulfilling those roles.
What's the actual reality like? I mean, is it just a constant battle to stop people getting in to lorries, and then when they inevitably do, then all of a sudden, you find you pull into Dover, do you, and you find that these people in, and then the border force says, you're essentially helping to smuggle people into Britain?
Yeah, well, it's basically, we send 50 trucks every week into the EU, so we're over 2,500 crossings a year into Europe. So for us to sort of speak up and say, this is unfair. We need to be doing it, speaking loudly about it, because this could happen almost every trip. We're diligent. We check our vehicles. We do our checks. We go above and beyond. We've got security cords, security systems in place to make sure that everything is in place and the best that we possibly can do to make sure our vehicles are secure. We always go through scanners on the French side of the border in Calais, and then come across into the UK side as far as we can, as best do, as clean as possible.
The Home Office says, all right, that you're repeat offenders. What's your response to that?
Well, all I'll say is we've had 2 incidents in the last 3 years, and we're doing 2,500 crossings each year. So yes, what's that? 7,500 crossings roughly over a 3-year period, and we've had 2 incidents. I think that's if you compare it to the number of dinghies crossing the channel on a daily basis, I think we're doing a pretty good job.
Well, I mean, there's an irony there, isn't there, really, which I suppose you are bringing much fewer people across than we are allowing in. The total fine, as I understand it, is £66,000, OK? And they sent you an email. Correct. They sent you an email. Drivers have been hospitalised a few years ago. Vehicles have been damaged as well. I believe they're also fining the drivers. Is that right? So have your drivers been hospitalised as a result of trying to fight some of these people off?
Yes, on my original Facebook post, I put a photo of one of our trucks that was attacked on approach to Calais a few years ago. The driver actually ended up in hospital. At the end of that, boulders were thrown at his windscreen, branches chucked under the front of the truck to try and stop it, so that people could board the truck. And then, I'm not quite sure what they were expecting to achieve by doing it. Obviously, the truck was undrivable once they'd smashed the windscreen, and our driver was hospitalised after that.
And you guys are the ones getting fined. The mind boggles. The mind absolutely boggles. Well, look, can I just say thank you very, very much for coming on the show. And I would like to continue following your story and your company's story as well. So I do hope to get you back on at some point soon, if you can keep us updated, and we'll reach out to you as well. So look, all the best going forward. I've got a statement here from the Home Office. The Home Office spokesperson says, "We are relentless in our pursuit of those who seek to enter the UK illegally and stand ready to respond robustly to clandestine arrivals. Far too many vehicles are not adequately secured to stop migrants boarding them. That's why in the last 12 months we've strengthened the haulier civil penalty with significantly increased financial penalties to ensure that drivers are taking every reasonable step to deter illegal migration and disrupt people smugglers." That was Ed Rogers there, you were hearing earlier on, boss of EM Rogers Haulage. Thank you very, very much. Look, coming up, worried Tories tell Rishi Sunak to urgently change course after Lee Anderson's bombshell defection to Reform UK. Apparently, some letters of no confidence have been flying in. I will be asking Jonathan Gullis all about that. Plus, should we pay migrants to move to Rwanda? I'll reveal all of the latest harebrained Home Office scheme that has landed just a few moments ago. And, of course, we'll have all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages for you. It's Patrick Christys tonight. We're on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. Whilst in the south-southeast of the UK, it is actually going to turn largely dry as we go into Wednesday. It's a different story towards the north and west. That's because we have a frontal system here that is eventually going to start to edge back southeastwards as we go through the night. That is going to bring some heavy, persistent rain across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later into northern England and Wales as we go through the early hours of tomorrow. Further south and east across the rest of England and Wales, a drier picture, but a cloudy one and a windy story for all, and so temperatures really aren't going to drop much, many places staying in double figures. As we go through tomorrow itself, then, this band of rain does gradually push its way a little bit further south and eastwards, but doesn't make much progress, so it is going to linger and bring quite a bit of rain across northern England and some parts of North Wales too. A drier story further south, limited bright or sunny spells here, but temperatures rising to highs of around 15 Celsius. Windy for most of us, but the strongest winds will be across northwest Scotland, where there's the risk of gales, but also some sunshine. As we go into Thursday, and again staying mostly dry towards the southeast, but elsewhere there'll be quite a bit of rain around, outbreaks of rain feeding up from the southwest across many places, with a band of more persistent rain across Northern Ireland and Scotland pushing northwards. Showers to come as we go through Friday. Some of them could be heavy, and then Saturday's likely to turn wet again. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
All right, it's time to bring you all of tomorrow's news tonight now with the first of the front pages. We start with the Metro. 3 held over £76 million care home con. Fraud office raids after company bought plane, yachts and supercars. There we are. Not the most subtle there, is it? The Independent, they've got a big picture of Andrew Tate, of course. He's back in court in Romania. But their big story is the Tory race row. PM admits donor who said MP should be shot was racist. Diane Abbott, it says here, Diane Abbott reports Frank Hester to the Met Police for frightening comments. Sunak forced to step in. The Sun. Paul leaves £125,000 to his dogs. This is telly favourite Paul O'Grady. He left £15.5 million in his will, and £125,000 of that was set aside to look after his 5 pet dogs, apparently. The Times. Well, a couple of big stories here on the Times. So, NHS bans puberty blockers for gender change children. This is a big story, and it's actually, in my view, GB News related. So it says children who want to change gender will no longer be prescribed puberty blockers on the NHS. Our very own Andrew Doyle did a big piece on this over the weekend. I'm not convinced it's a massive coincidence that we now have some serious action. But the big story at the bottom here is what we'll be zoning in on. Rwanda plan will offer migrants £3,000 to leave. So, look, on my panel, I have got GB News presenter Nana Acquia. We've got Conservative Stoke-on-Trent North MP Jonathan Gullis and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner. So let's focus in on that story in the Times. Sorry, Jonathan. Failed asylum seekers will be offered thousands of pounds to encourage them to move to Rwanda under a new voluntary scheme drawn up by ministers. The UK struck a new deal with the Rwandan government earlier this year that is separate to the controversial deportation scheme, which is currently being stalled in the House of Lords. So now, apparently, this is what's happening. Jonathan, so is this really something you would back, do you think?
So, obviously, like you, I'm reading it as it comes. I'm led to believe from the article that it says that this voluntary scheme has been running for a while for people to go back to their country of origin, and this Rwanda scheme would be unique because it's obviously sending people to Rwanda specifically, not necessarily their country of origin. I'm obviously going to be on the blower to Michael Tomlinson, the Minister, as soon as we get off air, Patrick, because I want to understand just how factually accurate this is, but also to make sure that this is something that the logic behind it as well. But I'll be perfectly frank with you, from what I've read, from what my gut instinct tells me, I'm deeply uncomfortable with British taxpayers' money being given to people who have illegally entered our country from safe mainland France, who are we've already meant to have identified, and I have seen from the Prime Minister a hell of a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure the operation of this scheme is ready to go. And simply, if you've come here illegally, you should be put on the plane and be gone. And we shouldn't have to encourage you to do that. Right. We should have the legal ability to just do that.
I mean, as far as I can say, again, just reading this, Nana, it will use the voluntary returns system that enables failed asylum seekers, foreign criminals and other migrants with no right to remain in the UK to return to their home country. Yeah, fine, voluntary return. But under the scheme, migrants can receive financial assistance worth up to £3,000 as well to return to their country of origin. So we are paying failed asylum seekers to leave, but apparently...
I just think this is just absurd. I'd literally just send them back. I don't understand why we're having such a hard time. Other countries are able to do it, but somehow we seem to have this woke brigade that make it almost nigh impossible to remove these people when they shouldn't be here, and they're able to access things like legal aid to continue to appeal and stuff. Again, we're all paying for it. It doesn't make any sense at all. We should be able to take these people back to either Rwanda without having to pay for them. It shouldn't be voluntary. It shouldn't get extra money for doing it. They're here illegally.
OK. Amy, your view on this? Taxpayers' money, apparently, it seems, going to offering migrants to leave.
I guess that they're trying desperately to get this within international law so that we don't continue spending $7 million a week on hotels. So this is a last-ditch attempt to make the Rwanda scheme work, in theory, I think. But my question would... actually, Israel did a similar scheme, this same voluntary scheme, to Rwanda, in fact. And it just didn't go as planned. And it ended with...
but that's the element of deterrent about Rwanda, isn't it? That's like, if it was like, oh, sweet, I'll just go to Rwanda, then it's not really a deterrent, is it? So that's the kind of... That's the plan with Rwanda, is it hits that squishy sweet spot between not really being awful from a human rights perspective, but also not being ideal.
But then it was only ever, 200 people, so there was there was such a vanishingly small chance of you even going to Rwanda that the scheme was impractical from
the scheme is uncapped
start.
because the scheme is about scaling up, and the idea is to get initial flights off the ground, and then we can quickly scale that up.
It's a very expensive way
over. Well, it's actually world leading, and it's going to be, I think, really positive when it comes to actually making sure that we get those flights off and we stop people having coming over here unnecessarily and illegally. And when Keir Starmer's got a stand in the House of Commons or on a news channel, which I know he keeps, dodging doing a People's Panel here on GB News, if he finds the backbone one day to actually do that, he'll have to justify to them why he would cancel those flights, which I think will go down very badly and will have a huge impact on the polls, particularly
I just think people will celebrate because although you're right that polling says that we want to control our borders, polling does not support the Rwanda scheme. It's a massive waste of money. Not the Rwanda scheme.
No, the polling does.
It just doesn't. What has it cost? 300 million.
No, you're wrong, though. I'm just stopping you there because you're actually wrong.
I'm happy to show you. I'm happy to show you a survey from my constituency.
Yes, it does. It does. And there's no alternative. No one's got anything other to say. All they can say is, "Oh, that's not very nice." Rwanda's
not really. They say process the claims and let them work.
It's almost slightly. It feels almost slightly racist that people are not happy about sending people to Rwanda.
But they have a terrible human rights record.
How many years ago?
Currently, they kill journalists.
Germany technically has a terrible human rights record.
Exactly. There are so many countries that have done bad things.
No.
China, Britain, in the past.
How long ago was it until after the World War, or did we start trading with Germany? Probably very quickly. So we can easily forget and move on with these things. And Rwanda is a good country, and it's an alternative.
It's just...
So would you say
the evidence doesn't stack up to what you're saying at all?
Have you ever been there?
And also, we've got that whole no quibble discount that Paul Garmy said he's going to give back the money if we want it. So why don't we just take that off and sort out something else?
Well, look,
what else?
In the next section, I'm going to have a little look about whether or not some letters of no confidence have gone in, and there's talk about a bit of a rebellion over the Lee Anderson stuff. But just to round this particular segment off, it was all going so well for a gang of luxury car thieves who used a sophisticated signal copying technique to open a keyless Bentley. But having mastered the art of unlocking the car, perhaps the gang should have put a little bit more thought into their getaway plan. There it is. Oh, my God. What a way to ruin a Bentley, eh? But that was the first gate. There it is, straight out the back of it. There was the first gate dealt with, and then there was the second. There we are. Yeah. Luckily, all four thieves have been caught and sentenced collectively to 12.5 years for the theft of 53 cars, valued at a whopping £3.7 million in total. Look, coming up, is NHS England doing the right thing by finally blocking puberty blockers for kids? Can youngsters even consent to such interventions? Find out more when I crown tonight's Greatest Britain and Union jackass. But yes, we're going to be talking as well about Cheltenham Festival. They've bowed down to the woke mob, have they? And scrapped tomorrow's Ladies' Day for the so-called Style Wednesday, the ironically named, that'll award both men and women for their fashion. When's the war on women going to end? It's Patrick Christys tonight on GB News.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Get this right, we all know by now, don't we, that so many NHS workers are abused by people that they're trying to help. We'll all agree that that is pretty damn disgraceful, but what do we do about it? Because now some London hospitals are looking at whether or not they should be able to ban people that do this for a year from those hospital facilities. Is that the way forward? Daniel, do you like this? No abuse, no excuse, that is the campaign?
There's no other choice for most people. It's either the NHS or nothing. And if you're going to take that monopolistic power, then you need, I think, you have responsibilities towards people. You can't cut them off. So there are ways in which, of course, you can bring criminal charges against them. If they commit a criminal offence, that's fine. They might even be locked up in jail. But what you can't do is cut off health services because you're the only supplier.
Well, yes, I think you can cut it off and you should cut it off. London is very different from everywhere else, and it goes back to a conversation about immigration. The majority of nurses in London are either African or Filipino, and it harks back to their nature and their culture. When you're younger, your parents look after you. When you're older, you look after them. They don't go into homes. So there's a way that a threshold of tolerance they have that is above and beyond most people. So, because I found like when I was younger, most of the nurses were white. Now they work in hospitals in Ascot and Somerset. London is the war zone. I have seen horrific things happen to nurses, and they stay. They show up for work. There's a protection they are owed, beyond owed. And if you abuse something that's offered to you as a part of your citizenship, there should be a penalty for that. For the same reason,
you're obliged to use it. There's no offer involved in the NHS.
But there is an offer, because at the end of the day, like you figure out how to get money and go private. So just because you've created something that gives you no, it's easy. If it's
that's
easy,
an impossible solution.
They've created something that's kind and easy and beneficial to all, indeed. But it's a good thing for all. Do not abuse it. That simple.
All right, welcome back. I've got more of your front pages for you now. Let's start with the Daily Telegraph. Starmer will allow assisted dying vote. A law could be changed by the end of the decade if Labour wins the general election. They've got also a story here. British students could lose university places to wealthy foreign students, and the COVID inquiry is fundamentally biased, scientists warn. So quite a big front page from the Telegraph there. The Daily Mail. What have they done with our loved ones' bodies? This is an absolutely unbelievable story. Families tell the Mail of their anguish as police describe truly horrific events at funeral parlours. And 1,000 people ring the hotline. So more than 1,000 grieving relatives have contacted a police hotline set up as part of a probe into an alleged undertaker scandal. I mean, dozens of families whose loved ones were handled by legacy independent funeral directors have been left agonising over whether the bodies were ever actually cremated or if they received the wrong ashes. I mean, good grief. The Guardian. Tory donors' remarks were racist and wrong, number 10. Downing Street has described those remarks made about Diane Abbott by the Conservative Party's biggest donor as racist and wrong. We did discuss that earlier on in the show. The Mirror. Heartbreak and horror there. This funeral home story, undertaker story, I should say. A woman told how she fears for her father and brother's remains as police spoke of a truly horrific incident at the Legacy funeral parlour. Yeah, I mean, it just beggars belief, doesn't it? The Eye, Sunak bows to Tory pressure to admit that the donor was a racist. PM condemns remark made by that major Tory donor. Here's the Daily Express for you now. Boris vows to campaign on great Brexit freedoms. Boris Johnson will hit the campaign trail to protect the hard-won and great Brexit freedoms he secured with his election victory. There we go. There's also a picture story of Camilla as a Barbie girl. So there we are. It's got it all. It's got it all. There we are. Obviously, I am joined yet again by my panel. We've got Nana Aquia, GBNews star, Conservative Stoke-on-Trent North MP Jonathan Gullis, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner. Now, we are always told that our health service is understaffed, underfunded and running on life support. But recent figures from the Office of National Statistics tell a very different story. It's been revealed that employment in the NHS has hit more than 2 million, meaning that more than 1 in 3 public sector staff work for our health service. That is over 3 times the population of Luxembourg. It is apparently 2 Djiboutis. This comes after the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt announced an extra £6 billion to go into the NHS, with the budget currently sitting at around £164.9 billion. However, apparently all of this is just not enough, with the chief executive of the NHS Confederation saying the extra cash would scarcely touch the side. Nana, are we now a health service with a country attached?
Well, do you know, I call it the no help service. If you've ever tried to use any part of it, it doesn't really get you very far. To me, the NHS is like a black hole. You keep chucking money in, but there's so much waste in so many different areas of it. I mean, it's a monolith, so they should be taking advantage of economies of scale in terms of procurement and buying things. But have they? Oh, no. They're still spending more money on drugs that you can buy really cheaply in other areas on the high street. So, for me, the NHS, no matter how much money you chuck at it, the problem is that it's a top-heavy triangle with bureaucracy at the top and loads of managers being paid a fortune. And when you actually get to the people that they need, they are looking for staff. It's just ridiculous.
Well, look, for me, I've said it before, and I agree with Sajid Javid, that we need to have a Royal Commission to actually look at what the purpose of the NHS is and we wanted to do. And I always find it quite amusing when Wes Streeting from Labour comes back from tours and says, Australia's really good, Germany's really good, we need to copy that model. And when people like me point out, well, that's a dual system of both private and public healthcare, he goes, but it'll still be public. So you can't really copy and paste something, honestly, and be frank with the British public if you're not going to actually implement it as it should be. And by the way, we know there's a lot of these equality, diversity, inclusion, nonsense people in the NHS. We also know that the Labour's legacy of the PFI, the Royal Stoke, which is in my area, 20 million a year is not going to the front line because it's going to service the debt on this ridiculous PFI deal. Okay. The hospital with 200 fewer beds built than when it was originally there, despite population growth. Absurd.
Amy, look, I mean, you know, we've got now, whatever it was it twice the population, 3 times the population of Luxembourg working in our NHS, for goodness sake, you know, record levels of funding. It's not enough. I mean, it's broken, isn't it?
Right, and we've still got massive vacancies on the front line in the doctors and the nurses, which is what we all ultimately really worry about. But I think people hear reform and they translate it to dismantle, and it doesn't have to be the case. One thing that I'm quite passionate about is putting more emphasis on preventative healthcare. We have such rubbish screenings. Like, we don't have skin cancer screenings by standard. We're really rubbish with bowel cancer. Things are left really late. Every time we talk about kids and we talk about that teeth cleaning, that's the most common reason, tooth decay, that children end up in hospital. Costs loads of money. So if we could really focus on that preventative side, we might be able to make the NHS smaller and reform it.
All right, OK, well, look, that's the NHS boxed off. But now, this story's caused quite a big controversy, right? So, the annual horse racing event, Cheltenham Festival, is in full swing today, but it's finally been noticed that one of its famous traditions has been whipped by the woke lobby, Ladies' Day. So, the second day of the festival in Gloucestershire, known to attract celebrities, royalty, etc., you know, it is what it says on the tin, right? OK, so people compete for best dressed. However, the sport's flagship festival quietly stopped marketing it, apparently, in 2018, but racegoers just very recently spotted the switch this time. The change also encourages racegoers to make more sustainable fashion choices, such as re-wearing or borrowing existing outfits, buying second-hand garments. I mean, Nana, does this lot need to get off the high horse?
Very good. I could do a really good horse sort of impression.
Oh, my God, Nana, that is amazing.
You see that?
That is amazing.
Look, I just think this is ridiculous, but I'm glad people have sort of spotted that. I think this is what this mission sort of creep of the whole sort of ideology is, that you don't notice these things are changing until years or weeks or whatever months later, where you're suddenly erasing something that was specific to one gender. So I would say that it does sound like some activists may have got in there and gradually changed it, and we were sleeping at the wheel like so many things, and this now doesn't exist. I don't know whether I care.
Jonathan, will you miss Ladies' Day?
I've never been to Ladies' Day, Patrick. All I'm saying is what Nana said is basically my comment on this. But look, I just think that it is absolutely absurd that we've got a situation where effectively we're cancelling women, which is what we're in effect doing, from actually having a day at the races, which is actually something that's really important to many racegoers up and down the great country of ours. And ultimately, I just think it's just virtue signalling, adding on the, oh, please re-wear sustainable clothing agenda. I mean, just let people enjoy themselves.
Go on, Amy, go on. I can see your head shake.
No, I just think you can level this kind of criticism at other things, but this is the Jockey Club. There's nothing woke about horse racing. They have 14 other race courses that all still offer Ladies' Day. They've changed this one particular event 6 years ago.
Why?
And also, a lot of people do get worried about what to wear to the races. They do, and it's quite a lot of pressure. So if you take that off a little bit,
what to wear sustainable things? That's something you've worn.
Well, have you worn that before?
It's just not realistic. If I was going to a one-off event every year, I would absolutely make sure I wore something totally different. And why should I be made to feel guilty or it's going to be sustainable? No.
Well, we'll keep you a royal ascot.
Just quickly before we go to Greatest Britain Union Jackass, there was a story as well that's been doing the rounds, and Jonathan, you know, it's his relevance to the Tory party, right? So it's about a bit of pushback on the Lee Anderson sacking and then defection, and whether or not letters of no confidence are going in. Where are you on that? Will you be handing in a letter of no confidence at all?
Absolutely not. The Prime Minister has my absolute full support. I will not be defecting. I've got no interest in defecting. I've been a member of the Conservative Party since I was 18 years old, being a councillor, being on the executive of local associations, ran in parliamentary seats and now become the Member of Parliament. I think it takes moral conviction and courage to stay and fight for what you believe internally than it does to run when actually...
You wish you hadn't sacked Lee, though?
I think Lee put himself in that situation, which Lee himself has admitted, and the Prime Minister did the right thing in saying that you need to say sorry. Look, working class values that my grandfather brought me up with is when you've done something wrong, when you've been clumsy, just say sorry and move on. And also, my grandfather taught me that when someone has given you something, when someone's looked out for you, as the Prime Minister did when he gave Lee that job as Deputy Chairman, don't bite the hand that feeds you.
All right, OK, right, look, it's time now for a very speedy edition of today's Greatest Britain Union Jackass. All right, OK, Nana, quickly, Greatest Britain.
It's got to be Lee Anderson, yes. So making a change in politics and showing that you've got to be principled, even if it makes you look, you know, you've moved from one party to the next, but they're not. All right. Conservatives are not Conservative.
Go on then, Jonathan.
NHS England, because finally common sense has prevailed, getting rid of these puberty blockers for kids. Thank the Lord.
OK, go on, Amy.
I've gone for this guy, Kevin Hilliard. He's had a pick and mix stall for 25 years, but the local council have said, this doesn't fit with our branding because we're focusing on health now. So they've kicked him out the market. The pick and
Which
mix
council?
stall.
Name the council. Name and shame this council.
Oh, this is ridiculous. All right, well, I will look into that a bit more, actually. But today's Greatest Britain is in NHS England. It's the puberty blockers being blocked story. I do really think that Andrew Doyle here at GB News deserves quite a lot of credit for his tireless work.
The only channel brave enough to raise this.
Yeah, exactly, to expose that. So well done. All right, Union Jackass, Nana.
It's got to be Diane Abbott. I think she's a complete embarrassment, so that's why, to black people in particular, me. So, no.
All right, well, short and sweet. There we go. Jonathan?
Won't well be, because he seems to want to bring down the Church of England whilst also allowing there to be a conveyor belt of fake asylum claims going through the parishes that he's meant to be overseeing. He's a dereliction of duty. He needs to go. All
right, OK. Obviously, they have denied things initially, but then have decided to launch an inquiry. And Amy?
The racist, misogynist Tory donor Frank Hester.
Right, OK, so a variety of different views here. The winner of today's Union Jackass is Justin Welby, OK, because, as you saw, and I would urge you to go back and re-watch this if you missed it, at the top of the 10 o'clock hour, we did a piece with Matthew Firth, who has blown the lid off this alleged asylum seeker conveyor belt that appears to be going on in the Church of England. Thank you very much to our wonderful panel this evening. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Headliners is up next, so they will be picking their way through all of the news. Thank you very much to everybody who's been watching and tuning in. Like I said, we had 3 exclusives tonight. Please do go back, re-watch the show. I will see you tomorrow at 9 p.m. Until then, make sure you keep fighting the good fight.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. Whilst in the south-southeast of the UK, it is actually going to turn largely dry as we go into Wednesday. It's a different story towards the north and west. That's because we have a frontal system here that is eventually going to start to edge back southeastwards as we go through the night. That is going to bring some heavy, persistent rain across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later into northern England and Wales as we go through the early hours of tomorrow. Further south and east across the rest of England,